Thank you for joining me. We're lucky here to have Rebecca Hales, who is actually my writing partner. And she's also a screenwriting teacher, and she's going to be taking us through the basics of screenwriting. We're going to start with short films because that's where most junior writers start from anyway. Rebecca, why don't you tell me a little bit about you and our viewers about you and how you became a writer in film?
That's a long journey. My name is Rebecca. The last name is Hales, and I am most recently a graduate of the Canadian Film Centre's Primetime TV Writing program. Previous to that, I have a master's degree in creative writing from UBC. Previous to that, I have a diploma in writing for film and television from the Vancouver Film School. And then I have a Bachelor of Arts in Literature from the University of Ottawa. So I have this career path, I guess you would call it, where I go to school and then go to work to pay off that debt, and then go back to school and then go to work and pay off that debt. So it's been a long journey to writing for screen, but that's where my passion is. And so there's a lot of academic work behind it, but there's also a lot of really fun practical work behind it. So that's sort of the nice marriage of intellect and fun, I guess is how you would put it.
Yeah. And then you also teach screenwriting, right? At One
I
Lip.
do.
Right?
I do. So in addition to working as a writer, I teach screenwriting through One Lit Place, and I'll have the link in my bio so that you guys can easily access that. But I do a number of different things. So one of the first things that I do is a one-on-one sort of story editing, where I can take your script and take a look at it and let you know what is and isn't working and sort of future directions for it. But one of the other things that I do are workshops. And some of them are an elongated version of what we're going to cover today. So it's 8 weeks of deep coverage of the basics of screenwriting. And then there are some more advanced workshops, things in dialogue and things in specificity around writing, the action lines, and some different forms of storytelling, so different act structures and things like that. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess we should probably get started because
we have material to cover. We need to get going. Okay, so what I thought I would start with is the question of what screenwriting is and what it's not. And I know that we've all heard the expression, write what you know. And I want to say right off the bat, we never ever mean that literally. If you've only ever worked at fast food restaurants, you don't have to write a story about working at fast food restaurants. What we really mean is write what you believe to be emotionally true, write the emotional truth of people. And then it doesn't matter what their circumstances are. They could be on another planet. It would still feel real to the audience, and it would come from a place of honesty in you. So if you wanted to learn a little bit more about that, I highly recommend the essays written by Tolkien on the subject of fantasy, myth, and language. What he basically comes down to is saying, it doesn't matter if your character is a talking tree, as long as they have human feelings, we can relate. So number one, start there. And then the second thing that I would say is, with your screenwriting project, whatever it is, this is your story. So swing for the fences. Write it exactly the way you want it. Write it as big as you want it. Shoot up as many things as you want it. Make it as small and emotionally contained as you want it. Just go for it. But I also am going to say that on drafts 2 and 3, you need to start thinking about all of the other things a screenplay actually is. And part of that is being a blueprint for all of the other departments to do their jobs. Casting reads this to tell them how many people they need to hire and how many of those people have lines. The costume department reads this. The lighting department reads this. The set design reads this. Location scouts read this. So it becomes almost like a contract. And when we talk about it being a contract, it's actually quite specific. If we're talking about getting an actor to sign on to a draft, and you say, okay, I'm going to do one more pass, but you've signed a contract, you're good to go. And then you go in and you write a scene that requires nudity. or a scene that requires fighting. That wasn't in their contract. And those are actually things that you negotiate separately. So you're back to the contract negotiation stage based on what you've written. So the idea when you're writing a screenplay, first couple drafts, go for it. Go as far as you want. And then after that, start to pull it back in the ways that you need to in order to think about production. And then once you get a producer on board, you start having those conversations about what can and cannot happen, and what you can and can't get rid of, what you can and can make work on a small budget. So those are the conversations that you have a little further down the line. And what I want you to do is take that information and sort of put it on the back burner so that later on, you're going to lose that 7th location because you don't have the money for it. But it's okay because that same scene is going to work in location number 2.
Yes.
So that kind of stuff.
I tell people this all the time, actually. When I'm in early development with writers, they always go, well, I don't know. And like, what about the money? And I'm like, just write the thing first.
Yeah, we'll figure it out later. And also, the fun thing about writing whatever you want is that a big part of writing that actually dictates how much money you ask for. Mm-hmm. So if you aim small in the beginning, you kind of are asking for less money because they know you can always do it for less. And that's the thing that you need to remember. Someone's always going to say, well, yeah, it's a $3 million picture, but like you could totally do it for 1.5. So you want to aim for like 20 million and have them dial it back to 10. So that's essentially what a screenplay is. You're telling a story visually, and you're also creating a business document. So what I'd like to do is maybe go into screenwriting software and format. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get into sort of the meat and potatoes of what a screenplay actually accomplishes. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So for the screenwriting software, we use really specific software because screenplays themselves have a really particular shape. And most of that is just around the tabbing, the number of tabs you have before different items in the screenplay. So there's a certain number of tabs before a character's name. There's a certain indentation. There's a certain font size. There's actually a certain font itself that you need to use and things like that. I would say to anyone who's just starting out in any kind of screenwriting, and even for the first couple of years as a screenwriter, don't buy screenwriting software. No one's going to love that I say that, but don't. There are a number of free options available on the internet. Go and use them.
Yeah.
Download free trials of things. Figure out whether you actually like screenwriting before you invest in the software. So start there. A big part of what we as professionals do is create screenplays in formal software because that software speaks to the other softwares being used by the other departments. I write in Movie Magic Screenwriter because it marries with the production software that helps figure out the scheduling and the pay and all of those things. I write in Final Draft because I know that everybody else in the room is writing in Final Draft and it's easier to share a file. Those aren't concerns for you yet. So get used to writing for screen in general, and then decide what you want. And don't be afraid to try free trials of things. Most screenwriting software does the same stuff because it's all very strict formatting. Mm-hmm. But they do each thing differently. So you want to get used to what feels most natural to you. Is it about pressing the tab button to get to the next line, or do you prefer the enter button to get to the next line? That's one of the primary differences between your screenwriting softwares. And it's not that big a difference, but
I'm sure you could probably change that too.
and it's really about getting into the minutia of how you work, and you won't know how you work until you've done it a couple of times. So what I've done is created a list of free or really low cost screenwriting software options that I'm going to load up onto the website, and you'll be able to download it. And because it's a Word document, you should be able to follow the hyperlinks and not have to worry about anything like that. So you should be pretty good.
Cool.
Yeah, it's make your lives easier.
Yes.
The other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit is the screenwriting format. And for this, I've included a script for you in your handouts, and it is an ancient script. Not gonna lie, it's been around forever, and it is still the most useful tool that I have, and I call it up very regularly. I give it to all of my intro to screenwriting students, and they all are like, "Oh, this is everything I need to know." And the answer is yes, it is. It's a screenplay that was created by the Nicholl Fellowship, and that is a screenwriting fellowship that is associated with the Oscars. So that is where that lives. And it is written as a screenplay. So every page is shaped like a screenplay. It has slug lines, it has action lines, and we'll talk in a second about what those are. But the dialogue all explains the formatting of a screenplay.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's a fun, zippy little read. I think it's 12 pages. It goes by really quickly, but it's also super informative. So if you're ever in doubt, just pull out the April Rider screenplay and look it up. They will answer all of your questions there. And so just really quickly, the elements that you're going to have on a screenplay are going to be very simple. Some screenplays start with the fade in and they end with fade out. Go ahead and do that if you would like. If you would like to skip it, that's also okay. There's a little bit of elbow room around there. You're not married to that. The first thing that you're going to have on a line is a slug line, and that is the line that is written in all caps, and it's interior or exterior, the location, and whether it's day or night. And that line is written that way in order to break down to your location scouts and to your schedulers where you're going and what you're doing. So we know that we shoot screenplays out of order. We have 2 days at this house. So every scene that needs to take place at this house needs to be shot in these 2 days. Well, they're all over the script. So we need to know whether we're going to be in the living room, whether we're going to be in the kitchen, and we need to organize all of those things together. So that's what a slug line is going to tell you. Next, we have action lines, and that's all of the description of the space, naming the characters, telling you what's happening about it. And we'll talk a little more in detail about what that entails later. But essentially, mostly we refer to those as the action lines. Some people refer to them as the blacks. You just want to make sure you don't write giant chunks of prose. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that it's too long if it's more than 3 lines. And I can tell you that someone who's reading screenplays is not going to read more than 3 lines. So you're going to want to keep that really brief and just be really specific. The next thing is the characters, and that's actually set into the middle of the page, and it's in all caps, and it's literally just the name of the character who is talking. That's it. Sometimes after their name, you're going to have a parenthetical that's going to read OS, which means off screen. So that character is inside the scene, but the camera happens to not be pointing at them in that moment. And so we're either not aware of them or they're sneaking up on someone or that kind of thing. That's off screen. OC means off camera. They're not around at all in the scene. They're in another room. They're calling out and you can either be made aware of them or they're bringing themselves into the scene. It takes a moment for them to join the space. That's what those 2 things mean. You have parentheticals, which are usually just underneath the character's name. And they're in old school language. They're referred to as Rileys because there was always that note about, they say a line Riley because no one had any idea how to write like this person has deadpan humor, which sometimes you need to, but it's usually a very small indication of how the line should be read if it's really specific and not obvious in the line. Or it's an indication in the middle of a chunk of dialogue to have a little line that says beat, and it just gives your character a moment of pause. And so we'll talk a little bit about those when we talk about dialogue and what they're used for and when not to use them, because as writers, we try to overwrite things and it's really hard to take your hands off. It really is. It really is. You want to control absolutely everything because this is your baby, but it's not. And once it's out of your hands, it's really out of your hands. So you have to learn to let go early in the game. Uh, the next thing that I want to talk about is dialogue, which is the actual content of what the character is saying. And you'll see when you look at the page that all of that is set to the inside. So it's really narrow down the middle. And what that does is allow your eye to scan the page and see really quickly who's talking when and how much. And it's also a really good way of you looking down the page and being like, there's an awful lot of action lines in this sequence, or oh my goodness, I have a huge amount of dialogue that I'm going to have to memorize. So it gives you a good idea of the pacing of things. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about are the scene cuts, which is at the bottom of the scene, at the very end, there's an action, little tiny bit on the right-hand side that is usually like cut to or fade to or a match cut. And those are things that you can or cannot use. Oftentimes, writers will only use them when they have a really specific cut in mind. So a match cut is where the last shot of this scene matches perfectly the first shot of the next scene. And it's important for dramatic purposes or for storytelling purposes that you use that. So if the last shot we see is of 5-year-old Henry looking directly in a camera, and then we have 25-year-old Henry looking directly in the camera, we don't have to say that that's Henry. We know that that's Henry. That's what visual storytelling tells us. But the match cut is necessary or we miss that beat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's the long and short of screenwriting format. There are a few little things like how to write a montage and how to write a series of shots, but they're all really clear and they're laid out in the April Writer screenplay. So rather than waste our time here, I'd like to just keep moving forward, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. So I want to talk a little bit about telling a story visually, because I think that for most new writers, this is actually the hardest transition. Learning to use the software it's actually pretty easy and you get into the rhythm of it pretty quickly. But one of the things that people struggle with a little bit is how to tell a story visually. And one of the first things that you hear people say is show, don't tell, which sounds like really solid advice. And then you think about it and you're like, I don't actually know what that means. So here's what it means. It means if you can demonstrate something visually, no one's allowed to say it out loud. So if I can demonstrate through my actions that I am angry, I never get to say I'm angry out loud. I don't have to. I've already shown you. I put my fist through the wall. You can tell that I'm angry. But it's also that if I've learned something in the previous scene, I'm not going to explain it to you again. If I've seen something, I don't need to tell you that I've seen it because the audience knows. And so there's this balance that writers need to strike between what the audience knows and what the characters know. So if I'm following my protagonist, and my protagonist is a detective, and in this scene, my protagonist discovers footprints at the crime scene and takes a mold and sends it off for forensic analysis. When I come back and I get the result of that forensic analysis, I have a choice as a writer. I can either put us in the scene and have the detective receive the information about the forensic analysis, and I never have to say what we're doing and why. Like, you sent me this footprint and I did a forensic analysis and here are the results. No, I already saw all of that. Don't explain that to me. Just start with the actual analysis. Or I can choose to have that whole scene take place off screen, and then I can have the moment where my detective explains the result to their partner. Either of those examples are examples of showing and not telling. They're examples of us conveying the information one time, and that's it. So what you want to do is have your visuals stand in opposition to your dialogue. What you don't want to do is have them repeat. If I've shown it to you, I'm not going to repeat it out loud. If I've said it to you once, I'm not going to say it again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you get used to it. And we all do that thing where we accidentally do a double beat on something. I explained it in the previous scene and then I forgot that I explained it, so I explain it again. That's okay. That's something that you go through multiple drafts and sort of work it out and pull out all of those extra bits, or realize that you explained it better in this scene, so you'll take out that other scene. That's time and practice is how you're going to solve that problem, because there's no magical solution to it. And another thing that is important to remember is that as you become a more experienced screenwriter, you get better at telling things visually, and you can cut out more and more dialogue. You can have entire scenes that take place just visually across the table in a series of glances that tell the whole story. And you get better at explaining that in a way that makes sense. So just practice, just practice. The next thing that I would like to speak to you about is screen time versus real time versus story time. And it's a bit of a mess, but here's the thing. So screen time is the amount of time in the real world that I spend looking at the screen. So if this story is a 20-minute short film, my screen time is 20 minutes. The real time in the story might not necessarily match the story time. So if it's 20 minutes that takes place in real time, then it's 20 minutes of my time as an audience telling me what happens in 20 minutes of your time on the screen. So you, the protagonist, are going to spend 20 minutes having the worst day of your life. And I, as the audience, am going to bear witness to that. The other difference is story time. So the 20 minutes of time that I spend as an audience with my eyes glued to this riveting thing on the screen might actually be 20 years of your life. It might be 1 minute per year of your life. So screen time versus real time versus story time. Real time is something that we can mess with in order to be better at using story time. And we can make story time work to the best of our benefit to make maximum use of our screen time. So if I, for example, use really great jump cuts and use really great match scenes, or do a really good job telling someone's story over 40 years of their life, and I can cram that all down into 20 minutes of screen time, I've taken real time, cut it around to make really good use of my story time, which then makes really good use of my screen time. And all of those are the kinds of things that you need to consider.
And that happens a lot in documentaries, right?
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. And the other thing that documentaries are able to do, which is really great, is playing with timelines. So they use flashbacks, they use flash forwards. In fiction, more than documentary, you also use alternative outcomes. So I think that one of the things that you get to do is decide whether or not something has to make it to the screen in order for your audience to understand what happens next. And that's essentially where we come down to. You're going to trust your audience's ability to infer from context about the next scene what happened in between. If I say, I'll see you at, Susan's party, I don't need to do all of the scenes that get me to Susan's party. Just show me at a party. I figure it's Susan's. We just talked about being at Susan's party. That kind of stuff seems really logical to us now, watching the screen. That actually wasn't necessarily the truth. And the more sophisticated we get as audiences, the further time we can place between one scene and the next and still have the audience infer that they follow one another, which is great.
And they did that a lot with noir films, and right, like they had a lot of inference between audience and storytellers, what the audience knew versus what the characters knew, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you look back at things like The Postman Always Rings Twice or The Maltese Falcon or Double Indemnity, for example, you get examples where the audience is let in on something that the protagonist knows in one scene. And in the next scene, you get the audience let in on something that only the antagonist knows. And that puts the protagonist in a position of jeopardy. Like, this is going to go terribly because you don't know this thing. And we're all going to have the totally angst-ridden experience of watching you go through this horrible thing, knowing it's going to turn out badly. And then we have to figure out what the fallout's going to be, which is great. It's great. And you can play with who knows what in order to have a particular emotional experience with the audience. So a really big part of screenwriting is deciding who knows what when. Is it better for a laugh if your audience knows in advance that this party is going to go terribly and it's going to end in disaster for you because someone has secretly planned your downfall? And then I have all of the anxiety going into this party with you, knowing you don't know what I know and it's going to go horribly, horribly wrong. Is that going to make it funny? Is that going to make it dramatic? Is it going to give me anxiety sweats? Because that actually happens. But it's true, right? But I think they also use that tool really well in horror movies, especially when it comes to creating suspense. So I know that the axe murderer is in the garage, and you, the protagonist, don't know that the axe murderer is in a garage. So when you say you're going to go and get that thing in the garage, we hear it all the time, people screaming at the screen, don't go into the garage. It's because we are afraid for them. And we've created that sense of fear in the audience because they know more than the protagonist knows. But if you're showing a detective film, having the audience discover things at the same pace as the detective is a really great tool for dragging them into the mystery and getting them completely sucked into the story and having them hit with the same blindsides as the detective, having them have the same moments of triumph, having them have the entire case turned on their head when a witness goes south and recants their story. Like, the whole thing happens all over again for you as an audience member. So deciding who knows what when is a really big factor into that. And what I would say to you as new screenwriters, write the story the way that you know it, and then on like draft 3, maybe draft 4, start asking yourself the questions of, do I have to say this, or can someone discover this later? Do I need to show this moment for the audience and hide it from the protagonist? All of those things, those are later questions. Ask them later, but remember that you will be asking them. That's essentially, I think, what I feel about the show don't tell and how to manage the story bits. If we're okay, I'd like to move on to the basic structure of a screenplay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to start with and only talk about the most basic possible structure for a screenplay. And what I want to say as a bit of a caveat is that there are a number of types of structures, especially in non-studio projects where you have a little more room to explore. And not just exploring the structures that are in cinema, but I think different cultures have different approaches to story. Some have stories that are almost like Russian nesting dolls, where you uncover layer after layer of meaning in the same story told multiple times from multiple perspectives. You have stories that are very linear, that move back around them, that are very circular, and that move back around themselves multiple times until you get to the deeper meaning. You have stories that fit different formats. And I think that those are all worthy of being explored in cinema. And I think that there's a lot of room for all of them in cinema. I think there's just not a lot of room to talk about them today.
Yeah.
So we're only going to talk about the 3-act structure.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we could be here for 2 weeks.
Or
And
you're right.
Yeah. No one has time. So the elements of the 3-act structure, really, really simple. And I've given you a handout that explains the 3-act structure. And I've given you a couple other handouts that explain different ways of telling the story laid out over the 3-act structure so that you at least have other options of what to look at. But essentially, if you were to draw that old school story timeline where you like raising the action and then it comes to a crash at the end, we all remember that line, right? We've all seen that. We're going to have a little bit of time where we spend in the real world. And that's that first little bit. And that's, I have to meet my characters. I have to understand what their day-to-day life looks like. I have to understand the rules of the world. If this takes place on another planet, is gravity an issue? Is everybody green? Do we all speak the same language? Those are all questions. And so all of those things need to be answered. And essentially the question you're asking yourself as a writer is, how much does my audience need to know in order to be engaged with this story? What can I put off a little bit, but not long? What do they absolutely need to know up front in order to believe what's going to happen next? So that's that first little bit. And that leads you to the inciting incident, which essentially is the spark of the story. It's the moment that, I was going to curse, but it's the moment that everything gets moving.
It's the oh crap, my life is over moment.
Well, yeah, and it's like, it's the bomb blowing up on the bus in Speed. It's the big moment where shit hits the fan.
Yeah, it's the snakes on the plane.
Yeah, it is the first snake on the plane. Yeah. It is the ticking clock that gets put into action. It's the call to adventure if you're looking at the hero's journey, but it is the moment that answers the question, why today? Why this story? Oh, because this just blew up. Oh, because their son died. Oh, because he just asked for a divorce. Like all of those things kick off the why you, why now. So it has its moment, it has its impact. And again, that moment might be enormous. You might be blowing up a building, or you might just be quitting your job, or you might just miss a phone call from someone that was really important to you. And it sets off a series of events. So that moment can be as big or small as you want, as long as it has a trickle down effect, as long as it has those ripples outwards of moments that if you could just trace them back to that inciting incident, you could change something. So that's what that inciting incident is about. And then you have your act 1, 2 turning point. And in every screenplay, it's a little bit different. Sometimes those two are back to back, boom, boom. And sometimes there's a bit of a space in between. It depends on the size of your screenplay, the size of the story you're telling, and whether or not there's a moment in between where your protagonist says, you know, I kind of don't want to go on this journey, and so I refuse. And then they're sort of forced to go on their journey. So the act 1, 2 turning point is essentially the jumping in standpoint. It's the moment where your protagonist says, okay, fine, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and dig into the work. I'm going to engage in this relationship. I'm going to solve this crime. I'm going to whatever the scenario is set out in your screenplay. And so you have a series of conflicts that go from your act 1, 2 turning point to your midpoint. And the midpoint is the point where your story takes a bit of a turn. And your midpoint could be a number of different things, but I want you to think about it in terms, the most simple terms, of either being a positive or a negative. So if my series of actions between the act 1, 2 turning point and the midpoint feels like I'm having all these wins, like I found this clue and it's amazing, I found this witness and it's doing great, I'm having all of these successes, then my midpoint, that's the point where the whole case falls apart. But if after my inciting incident, I'm getting hit after hit after hit, things just keep getting worse and worse and worse, then my act 1, 2 midpoint is one where things are going to start to look a little better. The story's going to turn around. A really great way of thinking of the midpoint is the moment when your character stops running and decides to turn and fight. And I always think about that in terms of like those action hero movies where so-and-so is on the run, and then there's this moment where they're like, no, I've been defeated one too many times, and so I'm going to pick myself up and I'm going to turn around and fight. And you immediately know you've had that moment when following it is a training sequence. That's the most obvious way I can think of putting it.
Every sports movie ever.
Every sports movie ever, but also most of your hero movies, right? There's a moment where your character gets their butt kicked huge and then has this like pull it together, get themselves stronger, learn how to use their newfound powers, whatever it is. They're gonna get it together because the next half of the film is about them scrapping their way uphill. So whichever version of your midpoint you have, the next half of Act 2 is going to be the fallout of it. So if I had a negative midpoint, everything has gone from amazing to garbage. I gotta slowly work my way back up. If I've had a really positive midpoint where everything was garbage and my midpoint, something finally goes right, I'm gonna start to build up and things are gonna start to go right. And the reason we want that to happen is because the Act 2 and 3 turning point is going to be a garbage moment for your character no matter what. We call it the dark night of the soul, or we
Your
refer
life
to
is
it.
over for reals.
It's the, oh shit, I think my character might actually die trying to do this thing. Like, I don't know if they're going to survive. I don't know if they're going to come out of this breakup with their heart intact or if this is going to destroy them forever. I don't know if this couple's going to make it through this horrible incident. I don't know if the character is going to be able to defeat their enemy. And the best moment I can think of for this is actually in the movie Elf. Don't know if you've seen it, but it's an amazing moment. But like Buddy the Elf is super into Christmas. And there is this moment where he's standing on the bridge and his spirit has been crushed by his dad. And his life is not what he thought it was going to be. And he feels very alone and no one really understands him. And he's contemplating not believing in Christmas anymore. And you can tell that he just like, this is the end of it for him. And you've got this horrible moment in this comedy where you're like, well, but you can't give up. Like, this is a Christmas movie. Things have to turn out well. But you
and
have that
Elf, for God's sakes.
I know. You eat syrup for dinner. Like, this is a thing. So what you really want to do is create that moment for your character. And what I would advise is no matter how big or small the stakes are in your story. So you could be talking about like saving all of humanity, or you could be talking about passing your math test. And it still is going to feel like the end of the world to your character. So whatever moment you choose, make it legitimately feel like this is the end of things for your character. There's no way out of this. And that's your 2-3 turning point. And that's how I know I've launched into my third act, because like now I'm going to roll up my sleeves and like, okay, shit's gotten real. And now we really need to get through this because there's no other way out of this story. We're too deep in it now. And so that's how we get to the climax, which is essentially the big fight. And everybody knows what the climax is. And it could take you 1 scene or 10 scenes to get from your 2-3 midpoint to your climax. Doesn't matter. Your climax is the big fight. It's the big showdown. It's where you put your character in the most possible peril and you just, by like the skin of your teeth, pull them out of it.
Yeah. It's when
yeah.
Mario battles Bowser to save Mrs. Peach.
Exactly. That is not the example I would use, but that's exactly right.
It's true.
It totally is. So with your climax, again, it can be enormous. This can be Endgame, where you are literally fighting to save all of the universe. Or it can be maybe this couple is breaking up And we're going to have to get okay with that. Big, huge, doesn't matter. It still feels big to your character. And that's the only thing that matters, is what it feels to your character. If I can believe what you tell me your character is feeling, I'm in. Doesn't matter what your story is, I am in. And I want to stay in the story. So you want to keep me there. And then the last part of the story is the resolution. And that's essentially the outcome or the fallout. That's, if we won the battle, great. If we lost the battle, what does that mean? And how do we tie up all of the loose ends? So if you are, if you're writing Endgame, you've got more story to tell. So we're going to leave some of those threads a little loose. We're going to leave some stuff out there because we know we're coming back to this world. But if you are writing a film that ends here and the world ends here, you got to wrap up all of those loose threads, because the last thing you want is for your audience to leave the theater or leave their screening experience being like, yeah, but what happened to character so-and-so? Because we haven't seen them since minute 10 and I think we lost track of them. Or, yeah, but did we fix that thing? Like, did that clue ever mean anything? You can have moments where you deliberately create ambiguity in whether the ending was good or bad. So if you look at movies like Inception, it leaves you with a certain amount of ambiguity. Well, was that good or was that bad? But it doesn't leave you with the ambiguity of whether or not everything got solved. And so that's essentially the resolution. It's the big outcome. Action and dialogue. So here are the most basic rules for action. Every single scene has to start with an action line that tells everyone where you are and who's in the scene from the very start. And again, that's because we shoot these scenes out of order. So you need to be able to go back and say, oh, right, for this scene, I need character X, so they need to be on the call sheet for that day. That's literally all it is. Whether or not you describe a place in great detail it's not your job. If you say that you're in grandma's house and it's decorated circa 1950 and has never changed, that's all I need to know as a scene decorator. I got that covered. I'm bringing in doilies and I'm putting plastic covers on all the cushions. I've got it. We're good. But going into the minutia of everything around you is going to be very distracting. And what you want to be able to do as a writer is only tell the people who are reading your script what you need them to know for the story. So if you write a gun in the first act, the gun needs to go off in the third. So if you've put something specific in a room, that specific thing needs to serve a purpose of some kind. Otherwise, leave it to someone else. It's their job and you need the space anyway.
Right. So it's the good old, oh, here's the setting, we're in the bat cave and the bat phone goes off. Yeah. And we know that the bat phone is a purpose and that the set decorator has to have the bat phone in that space at all times because the protagonist uses it.
Yeah. So the very first time you describe the bat cave, it's like bat cave, major computers, and bat phone. And now every time we're in the bat cave, we know that there's major computers and a bat phone. We're good to go. So with a script, and we're going back to visual storytelling here, you are not creating the story as you go. You're describing the movie that's in your head. The reason I'm telling you that is the action lines need to capture what the camera will capture in the order the camera will catch it. So in prose, you can write things a little backwards, where like someone goes to the door and then does something that immediately before that. We write things in inversions, but in a script, you can't do that. They're physically at the door. It's too late for whatever happened back here. So you need to make sure that you capture each moment as it's happening. And the best way to do that is to run that scene through your head and then describe it minute by minute, what's happening for the camera in the order that the camera is going to catch it. It takes an enormous amount of practice. You will not get it the first time. You won't get it the 20th time. That's okay. Just keep chipping away at it. You'll get better with every script. And you'll get more practice the more often you read scripts, which I highly recommend you do. Starting immediately, go online. There are dozens of sites where you can read scripts. They're available out there. Read as many as you can, get a feeling for people's style. The next thing that you need to know about action lines is use the active voice, please. He cuts the vegetables versus he was cutting. Takes place in the present moment, and it is active. And keep it short. Keep it super, super short. Unlike all of this chatter. There's just a lot of material. So for dialogues, the thing about dialogue is it's easier to talk about bad dialogue than it is to talk about good dialogue. So we're actually going to start with the bad. Here are some hallmarks of some bad dialogue, and you will know it when you hear it because it sounds so fake, or it sounds so awkward, or it just doesn't sound like a human would. And you've heard it. You know you've heard it because an example just came across your head. I know it. But those moments when you're like, that's not how people actually sound. Be careful. Those moments happen to all of us as screenwriters, and sometimes you don't catch them until the camera's rolling and then it's too late. But try to catch them. So hallmarks of bad dialogue: long speeches. We don't make big speeches. And unless or until you can hire like a Robert Downey Jr., you don't get big speeches. No one gets them because most of us are actually quite terrible at them. The next is people naming their feelings. Bob, I am so angry with you right now. No, you're not. No, because if you say that out loud, I totally don't believe you. But you're going to say something different to Bob that's going to tell me you're angry. You know what? Fuck you, Bob. I definitely get that you're angry and you've never had to name it. So people don't name their feelings. And if you look back at your own life, it's extremely rare that you name your feelings in any setting other than therapy. It's true, right? When was the last time you were like, dear brother, I feel very disappointed, but like, no, we don't talk like that. Yeah. Unless you do, in which case that's a very awkward thing, and I feel very badly for people in your life. The next thing that I think you need to think about a lot when it comes to dialogue is fillers. Like, so when we want to make people on screen sound like normal people, we think that they need to start their language like that. We need to include an O. We need to include a stutter. I need to start that sentence with, well, blah, 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 blah. You actually don't. And it's the weird backwardsness of screen, but the more tightly you script people's lines and the more specific you get with their dialogue, the better they sound on screen. And that's because screen isn't real life. And we forget that because it looks so much like real life, sort of. And it sounds so much like real life, sort of, but it's not. And so the best bet is to write a really polished, clean line and then trust that the actor is going to deliver it in a way that sounds supernatural.
Would you suggest that after you've written a first draft or second draft where the writer is comfortable, to do like a script reading, like a read through?
Very much. Yeah. Very much. And I would say my advice to you, writer to writer, like no one sees anything before draft 4.
The bane of my existence as a producer.
Yeah, because here's the thing. And you know what? We're going to talk about that in a second. But you only get one opportunity to make a first impression. And I know that you were so excited about your script because holy crap, you got all the way to fade out. And that's amazing. Like, you need to pat yourself on the back because you got from fade in to fade out, and not a lot of people cross that Rubicon. So congratulations, and please keep at it and do another draft and do another draft. But what you want to do is take a few days away from your script, read something else, think about something else, go back and redo it, and then find your one person, your best buddy, your writing partner. For me, that's you. And have them read a draft and give you really ugly, honest feedback. And develop a thick skin around that. It's okay to say, I love you, and your script is not doing anything for me, and here are the 10 reasons why. We can live through that. We will survive. The earth will not, in fact, open up and swallow you whole. It can hurt for a minute, and then you just need to shake it off and keep moving forward, because what someone is telling you is, I see something in your script and it's not living up to its full potential, and I believe that it can and it should, and here's what you need to do to get it there. And that is, I think, the piece of advice that I would give absolutely everyone. Because here's the secret truth between, like, around those of us who read a ton of scripts and who story edit a ton of scripts. I give very few notes on scripts I don't care about. But if you get a script back from me and there's something on every page, it is because I was super into the story. And now I think, oh, here's a moment where you can do this, and here's an opportunity to do that. And oh my God, this line belongs to someone else. If I have dedicated all of that time to your script, it's because I think there's something there. And I think you need to go in and you need to make all of those changes, or some of those changes, at least the ones that make sense, and take it to the next level. I'm trying to get your script from good to great. So jump in, take all of the notes, do them all. That's where I come from as a.
Yeah, it's true. You do. I see it actually when I send you stuff to story edit. We just sent Rebecca a few months ago a horror film to story edit, and she did. She in fact was like redlining and arrows and all of these things, and it was just like, oh, amazing. Like, I didn't know we were missing these things, or we didn't know we could do this too, and why didn't we think of that? And it's such good to have someone else's perspective as well, as someone who understands story structure like you do too.
Yeah,
and
that's the other thing. Don't get your mom or like your best friend to read any of your stuff, because your mom hopefully loves you and wants to see you succeed. So like, everything you do belongs on the fridge with a magnet. That is not the person to read your stuff. What you want is someone who knows enough about story to dig in with you and to say, this doesn't work. And you know what? They might say, I don't know why, but I got a weird feeling about this scene. And that's enough. It's enough for you to say, okay, there's something going on here that neither of us can name yet, but I'm going to dig in and we're going to figure it out. And you can do that. And sometimes you will get a note that doesn't make any sense to you, but they're trying to point at something and they're calling the wrong attention to something. Sometimes you'll get feedback that an actor is like, I feel like my character needs more lines because I really couldn't connect to my character. And at first you think, oh geez, like, not everybody can be the protagonist. But what you're actually hearing is, something's missing in my character, and we're not seeing them, we're not hearing them. They don't have any spirit on the page, or they're not translating from the page into the world. So there's something hollow about that character, because you can make a character with very few lines absolutely stand out. People have won Best Supporting Actor Oscars for tiny, tiny parts because you can just make a handful of lines really work. So think about that kind of stuff. Think about the quality of the language that you give to people. Another thing that I think you need to be concerned about when you're writing your dialogue: parenthetical performance instructions. So we spoke a little earlier about the parentheticals and how we used to call them Rileys. I think one of the things that we do as writers is we get super paranoid that no one is going to understand my sense of humor. And
Yes.
so I really need to explain to you how to tell this joke. And I'm writer to writer, I'm going to tell you, you're not that funny. And that's a problem. Your actors, for the most part, are going to be funnier than you. Let them have their take on it. Let them do it. Let them run with it. You know they're going to take it somewhere you haven't considered that is going to be absolutely hilarious. So unless there is a reason for the way that someone needs to say something that is plot related, don't give them a line read. It's not your job.
I
Let
have
the
a,
director do that.
I have a question. As
Sure.
a writer, because you just mentioned like comedy,
Mm.
um, and a lot of comedians on screen, they will improv,
Yeah.
right? Because, we'll have the script, we'll shoot the scene as it is written.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the times directors will ask, and even actors of a certain caliber will ask, can we do some improv takes?
Yeah.
As a writer, how do you feel about that? Because, improv sometimes skews far away from what's written on the page.
I have very specific feelings about that have changed a lot. So when I first started as a writer, I was very like, this is the dialogue that I have written, and you should not stray from this because it is very important and I wrote it. And I can say that now looking back and being like, wow, I was super precious about my stuff. But that was like 20 years ago, and I've had some room to grow. Here's what I understand now, and here's where I hope that you land as a writer, and you can skip all of the crazy that I went through, is I believe that what I have written on the page conveys what needs to happen in the scene. And once that is in the can, once I've gotten the logistics down, so the 3 pieces of information in the scene that the audience absolutely needs to know in order to understand what happens next, or in order to make sense of what just happened, done, got it across. Everything else, it's just filler. So let your actors go. Let them run with it. I am never going to be the funniest person in the room, and I write comedy. It's never going to be anywhere near as hilarious as what Will Ferrell's going to do with my work. It's never going to be anywhere near as interesting as what Chris Pratt is going to do with my work. Some of the funniest lines from film and television are absolutely improv lines. And you can go back and look at them. They are hilarious. The reason I mentioned Chris Pratt is that on Parks and Recreation, one of the characters was talking about how she was feeling very poorly, and Chris Pratt has a line where he looked up what she has, and she has like system malfunction. What he means is that like his computer system is down. He's like a software malfunction, but he thinks that he's Googled her symptoms and that's what has happened. And I would not have come up with that. He came up with that in the moment. There's no way in the world I would have come up with something that hilarious. And he came up with that line, and it was hilarious. And it changed everything about the scene. And it took the scene from here to here. I believe that with the best of intentions, an actor can try to elevate a scene by improvising. I also believe that they can improv and go horribly awry. But that's okay, because it's all going into the editing room, and the editor has the best interests of the project as a whole and not necessarily of the actors. So you're the first word in the story, but you're actually not the final word in the story. The editor is the final writer. So your job as a screenwriter is to trick everybody into telling the same movie that you have in your head, but give them room, let them go. That's how I feel about it. I don't know if
That's
that helps.
good. I think that's some good advice, though, for emerging filmmakers, especially ones that are collaborating with multiple people and they're not necessarily the writer, director, and producer of their project. They're maybe just the writer of the project, and they, to understand that there is a whole collaborative team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing that I would say is, instead of telling a newish writer to get over it, I would tell them instead to trust their collaborators.
Mm-hmm.
if you're working with a good director, if you're working with actors that you trust, if you're working with an editor who's got a really good sense of the story, trust them, believe in them. Because if you're working with people you don't trust, then your problem is actually in the production and not in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hallmarks, we totally got sidelined, but it was a really important sideline and I super like that. But I do need to tell you what good dialogue sounds like so that you don't go off and just worry about writing bad dialogue without any guidance to where to go. So hallmarks of good dialogue, good use of subtext. Two really good examples of that in, oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of the movie. Of course I don't. It's a movie about wine country. Help me out here, Rebecca. It's Paul Giamatti and
Uh, uh,
you're the worst for this. This is
the Tuscan Sun. Is that the one with Diane Lane?
no.
Which one?
That's Diane Lane.
Um, oh my
Anyway,
God.
she's gonna look it up. I am gonna tell you. There's a conversation that takes place between two male characters where they're talking about wine and what they like about wine and what they appreciate about
Sideways.
wine. Pardon me?
Is it Sideways?
Sideways. Thank you. Sideways. They're talking about wine and they're describing wine. And you know, they're actually talking about women. And it's beautiful and it's intelligent and it's really well written. They're using subtext. There's another really great scene from The Departed, actually, the US remake, where Leonardo DiCaprio, his character, who is an undercover police officer, is speaking to a therapist, has not disclosed his status as a police officer, but is describing to her his experiences. And essentially, you can hear what he's not telling her. You can hear him say, like, that his life is hard. You can hear him say that he's afraid that no one knows who he is or where he is or what he's doing, and that his records will be lost, that he will cease to exist, and all of these things that are coming across in his language, all of his secret fears. So what you want to do is create an environment where what is coming out of my mouth has this surface meaning, and what I really mean is all of this stuff underneath, and it's all coming up. That takes an enormous amount of time. We don't do it well on the first, I'm going to say 3 or 4 drafts. It usually takes me till draft 5 before I start doing that. And even then, I have to really think about it. But good use of subtext. You want dialogue that's clean and clear. One of the things that we do is accidental alliterations. We do too many S's in a row. We do things that accidentally rhyme. We do things that have a weird rhythm to them. Sometimes we write words in combination that actually look weird when the actor's saying them, and you need to rewrite that line because they're gonna look weird and the camera's right in their face and your screen's enormous. And so you wanna look at stuff like that. Clean, clear. You want it to be brief and you want it to be to the point. So you want all of your dialogue to say exactly what it needs to say as quickly as you need it to be said. And you want it to go back and forth. Quick, 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 quick. You also want it to be consistent with the character's voice. And for me, this is probably the biggest one. By the end of page 10 in a feature, page 2.5 in a short, I know exactly who your character is. And so I know what's going to come out of their mouth. And if on page 7 they say something and I'm like, that line is not theirs, or they were smarter than this at the beginning of the movie, there's no reason they wouldn't know how to do this now. Those moments pull me as an audience member out of your story. And then I don't know how to get back in. You've broken the magic for me. And that's a really big thing. So watch out for things like accidental alliteration. Watch out for things like broken rhyme schemes or broken rhythms. And you can write your dialogue with a rhyme scheme in a very subtle way that is actually really great and really beautiful. Brief. Like, you can't sustain that for long periods of time. It gets tiring. But you can do that. You can do someone whose line has a certain rhythm to it. It sort of forces your actor to say it in a particular way. That's okay too. You want to be careful about the use of jargon, about the use of slang and dialect. Part of the reason for that is deciding on your character's voice. If your character is a rancher from Texas, they're not going to use your $3 SAT words. Not necessarily. If you've created a rancher from Texas who happens to be a genius, go for it. But the guy who sells drugs on the street corner does not sound the same as the neurologist. They don't.
Would
So they
you
have to eat.
suggest that sometimes, like for example, like accents, that you don't write the accent out in the words, you just have it once in the parenthetical of, hey, this man's British. And then you're not overly trying to write in a British slang the words, you're writing the words, but we know that they're said in British.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's actually two things going on there. So if you have a character who, say, for example, has a London accent, you
Mm-hmm.
just first time, first parenthetical, this character speaks in a London accent. Great. And that again leaves you wide open because there are about 6 or 7 different accents in London itself, and you got to decide how posh this person is versus how not. And then what I would suggest that you do, just to every once in a while remind us of that, they refer to the toilet as the loo. It's a torch, not a flashlight. It's a jumper, not a sweater. Like little things that are natural to someone who is from London need to be natural in your dialogue. That comes with the territory. But then there are other things that I think sometimes you need to write them out. And I'm thinking really specifically here of a really deep Scottish brogue. And part of this is because of reading Trainspotting and Ecstasy and all of those books. They're written in a way where it's almost phonetic. And so there's a lot of slang, and there's a lot of sort of colloquial language in that doesn't make sense to my North American eye. So it's, if you write it out phonetically, you're okay. So a character who would say nay instead of no, you can write NAE. I get that it's nay. You get that it's nay. And the person who says it out loud is going to get that it's nay. And you can say like dinna instead of didn't, like DINNA. That's okay. You can write that out, but it's very specific to the character. So when you're looking at stuff like that, you have to decide how deep into that world your character goes. So for example, I wrote a piece where I had a character who was very Scottish, which is why I use that as an example. And all of their stuff was, it was just so deeply Scottish that I wrote it all out like that. I wrote it all out, and some of it was kind of phonetic. Some of it was the way that the language is written. So if you look at, tweets and blog posts and stuff like that that come out of that area of the world, you see all of that language written out. So instead of gonna, Gonna, it's like Ginna, but you get it. You get what they mean. So when someone reads it out loud in that accent, it makes perfect sense. When I read it in my Canadian accent inside my head, it's absolute nonsense. Just, I don't know what's going on. But the minute I put on a fake Scottish accent in my head, totally perfect. So you have to figure that stuff out. And I would say it's the difference between whether someone speaks with an accent and whether or not someone is deeply engaged in a local dialect or in jargon and slang. And a really good example of that would be in, I want to say maybe Layer Cake, where you've got, it's a British film with a handful of different actors from very different levels of society. And so some of them are like deep jargon where you almost need captions. You almost need something to explain to me what's going on. And mostly you're inferring it from what's happening because you barely understand them. And then you have these more posh characters. Well, of course you understand them because we in North America have all been taught how to understand that posh London accent. And we think that everyone British sounds like that posh London accent. Not true. but that's the way that works. So I would offer that as advice.
Right.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and that's, I think, I think that's like the content basics, how to write a screenplay. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do have some added questions.
Excellent.
So say I'm writing a screenplay and I finished it.
Okay.
What do I do next so that somebody doesn't like steal my idea? Because you hear about that all the time, that, oh, so and so is suing so and so because they took their idea and blah blah blah. How do you, what are the first steps to, like, say this is mine?
There were a couple of things. The first advice that I would give is, on the one hand, that doesn't happen anywhere near as often as we think. And on the other hand, we usually hear about it when it's too late. So please keep that in mind. You would do two things. There is the option of $4 registering something with the Writers Guild of America. So the Writers Guild of Canada has an agreement with the WGA where you can register your piece with them. And that means you can say, I'm going to register this outline and this pitch with them. And I'm going to work on the pilot on my own. And when I'm ready, I can add the pilot to that. The other thing that you can do is essentially lay a paper trail for yourself where you've got proof that something is yours. And a really easy way to do that is to mail something to yourself and then never open the envelope. So you can like take a hard copy of your script, date it, mail it to yourself, never open it, so that there's a date stamp on the mailing.
Yeah.
Do not open it. The other option is to email it to yourself and then save that email so that it's time-stamped. Because you can't, I mean, unless you want to go to really sophisticated ends, you really can't mess around with the date stamping of an email. So there's that. I think one of the things that we worry about as new writers is that when we hear about these things, we hear about them when they're already in court. So we don't actually know what happened as a precursor.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that often happens is that people will send an unsolicited manuscript to a producer's office. The producer will not open that envelope. If they haven't asked for your manuscript and they're not calling for manuscripts, they absolutely will not open that envelope. And here's why. If they have something in the works that is even remotely like that, the minute they open your envelope, they've opened themselves up to being sued because you were working on something totally similar. Mm-hmm. So they don't open it. Please be aware of that. Don't waste your time sending things unsolicited. Just don't. I don't know how to emphasize that enough, but
it's
but
true. Because, for example, for me, I get a lot of unsolicited emails from people being like, this is my project. Here's my script. Make my movie. And I don't even open the email. I just go, nope, don't know this person. And also the other thing is like, I have a policy that if I'm not working with someone or hiring someone and you send me a script, I'm going to make you sign a form that says you cannot sue me for sending me your material if I'm like, because example, like I could be working on something similar.
Yeah. It's true. And just assume, like, anyone worth their salt in the industry is going to make you sign a waiver when you send them your script. Mm-hmm. And what they will do, and this is how you know, is they will say, I would be happy to accept your script. Here's this form. Please sign it and get it back to me, and then I will accept your script.
Yeah.
And you got to do that. That's the way that goes. I think that one of the other things that you need to understand is that the Jungian belief in the collective unconscious is super real. We are all in some way thinking about a lot of the same things. And so that is how you end up with like Armageddon and Deep Impact coming out in the same year. Mm-hmm. Both movies about like world-ending comets coming to Earth. both of them, two radically different stories, and that's why they were both able to be pursued. But like, if you were to just say, I'm going to write a movie about a comet that's going to end life on Earth, what do I do with that? There's multiple versions of that story.
Yeah.
I can't lay claim to that. It's very broad, but also B, I can't say that I'm the only person on the planet thinking of that.
Yeah.
And so there's room. You got to give people latitude.
Cool.
Yeah.
Next question.
Sure.
Okay. What do I do next? I've written a script. I think it's, at a place where I'm happy with it and I trust myself to let it go out into the filmmaking world. What do I do? Who do I show it?
Who do I show it to? What do I do? Will you read my script? Meet producers, which sounds so much easier than it actually is, but that's why we have film festivals and that's why we have these forums. Meet people and build relationships. Make friends. And I don't mean, hey, I'm so-and-so, I've got a project, you and I should be friends. I mean, hey, I'm so-and-so, we have these awesome things in common, we should be friends. And then 6 months down the road, also, I've got this project, do you want to take a look at it? Build actual real relationships with people, build actual real friendships, because when it comes time to getting your movie made, you can be 2 and 3 years working with these people. And if they are people you only have a passing interest in, that's going to be a long 2 or 3 years of your life.
Honestly,
So
more than 2 years for some of us.
yeah, like
I'm with a project for like 25 years.
Like, it's just, you gotta like these people.
Mm-hmm.
And not just because you're going to spend a lot of time together and you're going to be with them in the long haul, but also because like you're giving them your baby. As much as we all, especially, someone like me, I've had 20 some odd years of writing practice. You can say whatever you want about my script. It's just words on a page. It's got nothing to do with me. And yet there's this tiny moment when I hand my script to someone else where I'm like, because that's my baby. Please be nice. And so if you're going to hand this thing that is kind of a piece of you that you've spent 2 or 3 years working on, and it's, these people, you've lived this life, you're in this world. If you're going to hand that over to someone, you better hand it over to someone you like. Because if you hand it over to someone you don't trust, or you don't think has your best interests at heart, or maybe doesn't have the best interests of the project at heart, you're going to lose control of your piece. And as a writer, you should know when you lose control over your piece, depending on your contract, you might not get it back.
Yeah.
So be warned.
Yeah.
Be warned. Yeah. Or you might end up in development hell with them. Like, you might end up in 3 years of just trying to pull together the funding.
Yep.
So
As
you and I have done that.
As you know about our projects.
I know. But you know what? Eventually you get the funding and things start to move forward, and you better not be sick of those people by then. Mm-hmm. So meet people that you trust and that you like. And if you can, meet them locally, but I would not limit yourself to your local surroundings. Especially these days, you can do a lot of things by distance. When it comes time to filming it, that's another question, but find a producer who speaks to you and whose sort of sensibility jives with yours, and move forward from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then because we've mostly talked about 3x structure for, let's say, for shorts.
Yeah.
What's the difference between a short and a feature in this, let's say, a 3x structure?
Size, actually. So if we think about the engine of a story, so the thing that moves a story forward, when we talk about the inciting incident of a short script or a short screenplay, we're talking about it like an explosion that only needs to be big enough to sustain like 10 pages of action. Doesn't need to be that big. But if I'm looking at like 90 pages, that better be a big inciting incident. It better be an inciting incident that has a lot of built-in conflict, because I need that many more obstacles between my protagonist and their goal to get me all the way to the midpoint. And then I need a whole bunch more obstacles to get me all the way to the Act 2, 3 turning point. And then I need even more obstacles to get just size. But it's the size of everything. So it's not just like in a chase scene where someone's knocking over the bookshelves behind them to like keep someone from catching up to them. Those aren't obstacles. Those are inconveniences. You want genuine, you're locked in this room, there is no key, there's like one window at the top corner and you don't have a ladder, like, are you going to get out of this? Big scale obstacles. And you want big scale problems. So even though, say for example, in Kramer versus Kramer, your main dilemma is not the end of the world. It's whether or not this guy's going to keep his kid because his wife is gone. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like small p problem, except that in his world, that is a capital P problem. And all of the things that stand between him and getting custody of that kid are capital P problems. He loses his job, which means he could lose his home, which means he could lose his kid. Like all of those things have high stakes outcomes for the character.
Yeah.
What you want to do is build the world of the character so that it is robust enough and it's got enough material to get you all the way through to the end. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then this might be a tough one for you to answer, but I'm going through this with myself at the moment. But how do you solve writer's block?
Oh my God. So I can tell you what I do. Whether or not it makes sense to you is, I don't know. But if I have writer's block about a particular project, I usually step away from it. And if it's a project that is, say, like a family story, I will go and I will watch a bunch of horror movies and I'll read some like really cheesy YA fantasy. And like, I will just fill my head with stuff that is not that. I will go to the art gallery. I will go for long walks. I will just refill the well. Because for me, when I encounter writer's block, it's one of two things. Either one, the well has gone dry and I did not refill it. So the place from which all creative things happen in me is empty. I just have to refill it with art and music and story, and I need to like dance around in my underwear, and I need to taste really good food, and I need a nap usually. Like all of those things, just chill out, back away, calm down. And eventually you'll come back to it and it'll feel fresh and new again. And you'll be like, oh, here's what needs to happen next. And it'll come to you. The other way that I get writer's block is when I refuse to accept that there's a problem in the fundamental concept of my story. And I write myself into a corner because I just don't want to go back to the basics and like go back to the foundation and rip it all apart and start over again. But I always end up ripping it apart and starting over again. Usually when you get writer's block in that sense, you have a couple of problems. Sometimes you've written a character or you've created a character who does not have in them the tools they need to get through this story. And so, or to get through this dilemma, or they don't have the ability to learn the tools to get through this dilemma. And so I've sort of blocked my character's ability to navigate this world. Or I've written a scenario in which technically the solution would have been on page 12 and my story should have been then done. And I've manufactured all of this like fake drama to keep going because it's supposed to be a feature and it should have been done. So often I will go back and look again at my dilemmas and at my engine. Like what is the combustion that is moving this story forward? And I think one of the things that most of us don't want to admit to, I have no problem admitting to it because I'm a working writer. I'm not magical and I don't fix things really easily and I run into these problems all the time, is that sometimes when you look at your story, you're so enamored with it, you can't imagine it not being a screenplay. You can't imagine it not being this amazing thing that goes on and like stars all these amazing people and makes you $1 billion. And that's not the case. Sometimes your story doesn't want to be a screenplay. Sometimes it wants to be a short story. Sometimes it wants to be a novel. Sometimes it needs to be something else, and let it go and do it. Write it as a short story, because you might actually have an easier time coming at it as an adaptation,
Right.
coming at it as a screenplay. Sometimes you need to work out the kinks of your story in some other format. So do it. Work it out like that. Do you need to write a journal about it? Go ahead, write a journal about it. Do you need to write a journal as though you're a protagonist? Go for it. Who cares? Just get your head out of your own butt when it comes to this stuff. There's no other way of putting it. Just get your head out of the story and try something new. Go work on something else. Take a minute. And if the story has really reached a roadblock, give it to someone else and ask them what they think.
Yeah. Cool.
Because they'll tell you.
Yeah.
And it'll be ugly. Like, not gonna lie, they might say that's because this is not a screenplay, or meh, it's okay, but like, I don't know why we're having this conversation. So, be ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think that's all the questions I have.
I don't know. I feel like we could talk about this forever. So at some point we should probably just like press cut and call it a day. But for those of you here, if you have any further like screenwriting needs, if you want to take a class, or you want to work with, say, me as an editor, just go to the One Lit Place website. It's in my bio. You're very much welcome to reach out to me that way. It's not a problem.
Cool. Awesome.
Thank you for having me. This was super fun.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, thank you for doing this. I know it's weird with the COVID thing, so we're in different cities, but Zoom works.
Yeah, Zoom for everything these days.
Yes, and next year, hopefully, you can come attend the festival in person.
That would be fun.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much again, and hopefully, maybe we could do another workshop next year or something.
That would be amazing. And good luck, screenwriters. Go forth, create art. It's gonna be great.
Awesome. Okay, we'll chat soon.